Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Lunchtime Learning. I'm delighted to be joined today by Dobbers, Ian Dobrin. Thanks very much for joining me. How are you doing?
Thanks, Stephen. Really lovely to be here, Stephen, honestly. I watch them all, so to actually be on one is amazing. Can't wait to see it.
At least I know I've got one viewer, so thank you very
Yeah,
much.
I've got one fan, big fan, huge fan.
For one listener. So, Ian, for people that don't know you, tell us how you've been doing it for a few years, just a few years, and how did you get into industry?
Well, I think I'm one of the very few people that can say they've probably done every job in the industry. So I left school at 16 in 1979. I started with a big firm in Mayfair, 500 people, and I actually started as the post boy. I actually delivered the post to all 500 people, which probably, I think, explains why I talk a lot and I'm a bit of a networker, because I literally had no choice. I spent 2 years in Mayfair with Edward Erdman, went into residential, worked for Bairstows in Essex twice, the original Bairstows owned by John Bairstow, only 20 branches in those days. Worked for Douglas Allen, who are now part of Aaron Estates. I ran 7 offices, so I did the area manager job, so from junior to negotiator to manager, opening branches, and then area manager. I ran 7 offices in East London, Dalston, Walthamstow, Hackney, all the places people didn't want to live in those days, and now no one can afford to live there. I left the business suddenly in '93 with a really good job, obviously, and started probably the only second recruitment company behind Property Personnel, who are still going amazingly today, Anthony's business. I started a recruitment company called Estate Agency Personnel, Financial Services Personnel, and overseas property jobs eventually, and ran that for over 20 years. Had a bit of a blip at that time, wound the business down, went to work for Connell's Group for 7 years, working directly to David Plumtree, Stephen and David Livesey, and I set up their in-house recruitment department from scratch, stayed there for 7 years before COVID. Since COVID, I've been doing lots of NED stuff, helping loads of sort of different supplier businesses out from time to time. But literally 3 months ago, fell into what I feel now is my purpose in life, which is the review business. And Verified Trusted, my company, which we will talk about very briefly in reviews, it's actually been going for 18 months, and I was recommended by someone within the industry to speak to the owner of it, who was doing it all on his own. It's a brilliant model, to start opening some doors, and that's what we're doing. And we're working with the estate agency industry first because it's my first love, and the contacts are there. So that's where I'm at right now. So coming up, actually, I keep saying to people now, it's got easier to say to people, Stephen, in 4 years' time, I would have been in this industry in and around it for 50 years.
Wow, amazing. Right, loads of lessons to unpack. So
yeah.
I was a post boy as well when I first started, and I must have been round the corner to you because I was in Oxford Circus. I was at Gross Fine.
Gross Fine and Wickershlackham, whatever they were called. Perry was there, friend of ours, Green.
Yeah, so I did.
All their post boys in those days.
Yeah, did a lot of photocopying, did a lot of running around to get ordnance survey maps and stuff like that. So lessons learned along the way. So you talked about being a post boy, but you talked about networking. So let's talk about networking. Why and how do you think it's so important? And for people out there that actually don't have your experience and are afraid to go and meet people, how do you first begin to have those conversations?
I think, in my humble opinion, networking, I just love people anyway, so I just talk to strangers in the street, strangers in lifts. I'm one of those. I once went on I think it might have been Tony Robbins' course, and he talked about, why don't you just try to, next time you're in a lift, to talk to someone, because we're all looking at the buttons on the ceiling. So I just love talking to people. But over the years, I just think you've got to have an interest in people, and then people have an interest in you. And estate agency particularly is such a people business that you never know where the next piece of business is going to come from. It's not all about making money, and what's in it for me. I think it's something that when you network, you just get to know people. You're learning all the time. you're seeing successful people, you're seeing people that are trying really hard to be successful at what they do, and sometimes it's not always working. So I just think networking for me, I got into LinkedIn in 2007 when it first came to the UK because I was doing overseas recruitment. It was big in America, and it literally only just come to the UK. They told me I was in the top, I don't know, 10,000 in the UK, and now there's about 40 million people on LinkedIn. But I saw that particularly as I think people can go and reference you. People can genuinely go and see you. People are very quick to make judgments of people. Estate agents are very quick to make judgments of vendors and purchasers, literally on face value sometimes, or even on a phone call. But we're able now to check out people. We're able to go and see people, get to know people, get to see what their interests are. And networking, I think that's what it does for you. When you talk to people, when you go to a conference, you make new friends every time. I've got friends and business acquaintances from 30 years ago from networking outside shows and some of the exhibitions. And I think it's something that probably the next generation of youngsters in our industry don't get because a lot of their activity is done online and done on social media, so they don't actually get that experience of shaking hands and talking to people outside a show. So I think that people need to get back to that. And just networking for me is I just love just knowing what other people are doing. And occasionally it makes me money because people remember who you are, and you get that phone call saying, I want to buy your product, I want to talk to you about your service.
Okay, great. So coming back, Bairstow Eves. So
Yeah.
going from negotiator to branch manager to area manager, what were 2 or 3 lessons that you learned along the way?
I think it's really funny actually. I had some really bad bosses when I was younger, and I say that I actually, looking back, I learned more not how to treat staff from them and how to be a good manager. But I had some great bosses, so I think when you first start in this industry, or you're a negotiator, or you're now even in a self-employed model, which is a completely different way of thinking now, find people that you can watch and mentor. Have role models. When I became a manager, and I think I became a really good manager of people, it's because I either had some very good managers before that myself, or 1 or 2 that weren't so great. And I remember thinking I wouldn't do that when I become a manager. I wouldn't treat my staff like that or talk to people like that. So I think that's it. It's finding a few people, and I'm still friendly with some of my bosses from the 80s, which is amazing. They're all retired now, but I still speak to actually 2 of them particularly from those days at Bairstow Eves and Douglas Allen.
Okay, so talk about the importance of role models. You talked about the being a good manager. What do you think, looking at it from a recruitment side now, what do you think it takes to be a top performer in agency?
I think first of all you've got to love it. I think the public do sense whether you love it or not, and I do go on about personality and things like that. But it's you've got to have the personality. But I think that it's really important that people know that you enjoy being in their house. You enjoy finding out about their family and their motives for moving. I think also it's definitely just generally being interested in people. I think that's a real factor when you're actually expecting people to want to do business with you. And a lot of people take themselves too seriously as well. And you've got to realise you're dealing with normal people. We always go on about it's their biggest asset, but actually the asset isn't really important. It's actually, you could be selling them, a small item or anything. It's the way we want to be treated when we go into a retail shop, the way we want to be treated when we go to an event. It should just always be that you're interested in them as the potential customer, and sometimes friends, because I see loads of posts from agents at the moment saying handing the keys over to the purchasers, and especially the younger ones, they're going to be friends with some of those people for a long time.
Yeah, that's if they've got a proper stay in touch policy, because so many agents don't have a proper stay in touch policy and let everyone go into witness protection, which is really, really scary.
Definitely.
But look, I agree about the enjoyment. I agree about, it's about being curious, getting to understand people, but still a firm believer that I don't I think the consumer doesn't understand what estate agents do.
Yeah.
How do you think estate agents can better educate the consumer as to what is involved in a very stressful, challenging process?
Well, I think I'm going to sort of kick into reviews here, Stephen, because I think that I've spent all these years, as you have, many years in an industry that we actually tell ourselves we are the most unpopular people. So when you hear that statement, that estate agents are the most unpopular service provider out there, but in the public's opinion, it's normally coming from people within the industry. So we seem to have a complex about our own standing. But since I've been involved in my short time now, looking at reviews more seriously, actually that's not the case. You look at the thousands and literally tens and hundreds of thousands of positive reviews that letting agents as well, have got, because they're always saying we don't get good reviews because obviously the tenants don't like us. But so I would say you need to share more than ever about your reputation, what you've done in the past, what you've achieved. And we're not very good at that. We've never been good at that. Back in the day before the internet, we used to do leaflets. We've sold this house, we've sold that house. Some of the old stuff still works, but actually sharing what previous customers think. I've just seen a post from an agent that in North London that sold a house, put a sold board up, got a phone call within 3 days from a house 2 doors down saying, I've seen you've sold my neighbour's house, I've spoken to him, can you come and see me? And the video was of two sold boards almost next door to each other. And that is purely because the owner of number one had really good things to say about agent number two and spoke to his neighbour who was thinking of selling. And what I'm finding with reviews is that agents have got so many hidden. The ones that haven't will really struggle. I'm not going to bore you with stats today because I do know lots of stats about, if you don't get reviews, even one review can make a difference to your business. Estate agents have always been really poor at selling ourselves, at telling people how good we are and how many satisfied customers we've got. And I'm finding out now that when we go to lots of agent sites, they either haven't got reviews or they're not showing them very well. So, I mean, obviously, that's a big thing for me at the moment. That's why I'm so excited about it. But I think that covers all, that we are more popular than we think we are. And we should start talking about that rather than making the old joke we're the most unpopular.
Okay. How does one go about an article review?
How does one go?
An article reviews? Because again, it's getting outside your comfort zone for some people, actually asking a question. So for some, obviously, it's a lot easier. But for some, they're shy. They don't want to ask. Any tips on the best way of asking, the best way of...
I learned very early on, probably at Bairstow's in the 80s, because they were really ahead of the game when it comes to best practices. They were the first company to have proper training with Man & Co and the companies that eventually grouped together to form the original Countrywide. So I learned very on about good habits, best practices, and I think the review situation should be born into that. I think there's a big responsibility for owners of businesses to coach, train, and encourage their staff to do it. So I think that's a big subject that we're covering off now. We've spoken to companies that really do talk to their staff all the time about the reviews, and they acknowledge them when they come through. So I think for someone if you're in an estate agency office and you're shy, you're probably not going to ask anyone to value their house. But what we're finding is there is an optimum moment to ask for that review, which makes it a lot easier as well. So when you exchange contracts, you should get 2 reviews almost that day, very easily. That is the day that the vendor and purchaser adore you, especially the vendor before they get your bill at the end of completion. And when with lettings, the moment that the keys are handed over and everyone is happy. Someone's got a new home, someone's rented a new home. There might be a third-party company involved that you're using and working with. That is the moment to get it. So I would say it's much easier if you do it at the right time. And again, that's a coaching thing. And what I'm planning on doing over the next year or two is helping, along with trainers like yourself, really, Stephen, to actually improve that now, because it's not that hard. It's not that hard. We give our clients a QR code if they want one. So we can give them free of charge a QR code that takes people directly to whichever source they want. So you can literally, if you're handing over the keys, you can say to someone, look, can I show you my phone? Could you go on this QR code now? And get the review there and then. Lots of other industries, restaurants and such like, they'll ask you for a review at the table. And that's when you've had a really good meal and you're loving the waiter and you've had a few drinks and you're happy to do it. I know trainers that will ask people at the end of their course because people are buzzing. They've just had an amazing day. Estate agency is no different. It's those sweet spots, it's those moments when you can do it. And what's really interesting is that when I was an estate agent, we couldn't sell every house, we couldn't let every property, but a lot of those vendors and landlords still liked us. So at the end of that journey, I'd still make a point of going to get a testimonial back in the day when it was a handwritten testimonial. And great to get a testimonial saying, look, Stephen didn't actually sell my house, didn't manage to sell my house, or we withdrew for personal reasons. But he was great. You know, Sally was fantastic. And I think people don't realise that it is that easy. You know, if you look at the stats outside of our industry, people are really happy. Something like 70% of people, there's a stat, 70% of people are happy to give a review on anything that they're buying, they're experiencing. But as an industry, we're really poor at asking. Generally, I'm finding some amazing companies actually. Some of them are really cracked it, and I mean even down to search engine optimization. That's really important to people. If you look at the top three, and I think there's a few companies now that are selling services, going to be offering amazing services to help companies to get into that top three on the right-hand side. Google stats, and this is from Google, the average reviews that those top three have got is 47 each. So if you've got 20, or you haven't got any, or you've got 15, you are not going to get on that top three in Google, on the Google local page. So it's really important from that point of view that reputation. And one last thing, Stephen, is I looked at some details about when people are selling businesses. You know, we've got a lot of people in our industry that, you know, the baby boomer era that are now looking to maybe pass their business on or sell their business. Something like 50% of the value of a business, potentially up to 50%, could be down to the reputation of the business. So again, you're adding value to your own business or your own self-employed book, if you like, if you improve your reputation.
I couldn't agree more. And actually, I think you made some really good points, you know, especially minimum of 47. I think it's at 4.5, 4.6. That helps you. Again, which is really important. But one of the points that you made there, I absolutely love, which was that it may not be people that have bought through you or sold through you, but actually you've done a viewing with them, you've given them an exceptional customer experience, and they may become your raving fans, but ask them for reviews as well, you know, and it's simple in life. If you don't ask, you don't get. So,
it's really funny
and if
actually.
they say no, they say no. You know, maybe that's a learning curve because you haven't done something right in the first place.
I think that we all get a kick out of exchanging contracts. We all get a kick out of a tenancy agreement and handing the keys over. Most estate agents, even more than when the money comes in. The biggest buzz is when the solicitor says it's done. We've managed to get it over the line and it's going to happen, and then we get the date. And reviews in a smaller way, they are really rewarding. They're really satisfying. We've got employers where we know that they're monitoring the reviews and they're recognising them in their small firms or their 10 branch businesses. They're seeing the reviews coming in. What's really interesting, you look at a 10 branch company and there'll be 7 branches that are smashing it and 3 branches that are not interested, really not interested, or maybe, like you said, they've got that fear of it, and probably with a bit of support and a bit of coaching, they can start collecting them. And it can be a friendly, competitive thing as well. You know, I'm going to get, these are verified reviews. You can't get people, you can get your mum and your dad and your brother to do so many, I guess. but 99% of them are verified by customers. And it should be something, I say, my little thing is where your reviews, 5-star reviews with pride, you deserve it. So like a medal, people should start thinking. And as we move on, it's going to get more and more important. There's no doubt about it. I think it's now reputation is just so important. People have got so much choice. And in agency, we've seen the growth of the self-employed model, which the high street needs to compete with, which I think is just natural progression. But some of those high street agents are much better at going out there and getting reviews for themselves. And I think that all companies can learn and improve. I've seen some amazing ones from some of the corporates actually as well. A lot of it's down to the leadership. If they believe it's important, then they pass that down the food chain, and good managers pass it down to their staff, and it stays with you forever. So, but it's definitely a coaching thing. Getting back to your original question, I think there's a coaching exercise that needs to be plugged that might have been missed. And to be fair, reviews are only 5-10 years old, but it's been prevalent, and especially Google reviews now, because something like Google have got 70+% market share of reviews, 70% globally. So everyone should have a Google account, and everyone should be collecting Google reviews, as well as the other many fine review sites out there.
100%. Right, just coming back, because I'm conscious of time, a couple of other questions, if that's okay with you. So just on the recruitment side, I know a lot of people struggle to recruit. How do you go and find people that maybe didn't know they were looking? So headhunt. And are there any particular questions that you used to ask to find out about people?
Oh, there's so many, Stephen, and it's actually been a long time since I've actually directly recruited. I thought you were going to ask me, how can reviews help recruitment? Because they actually can. We've got one client, we're just about to sign our first client up in the Middle East, in Dubai. And the thing they said to me, and we're now transferring this to the UK, is that candidates now are more sophisticated. So before they even decide whether they're going to go for an interview with a company or entertain that company, they look at customer reviews. Amazing, isn't it? So they look at customer reviews to see what the customers think of that company before they decide whether they go for the interview day or the open day. So I just want to get that in. That's what I thought you were going to say. But I just think, again, we have got a major problem. There is a real shortage of talent in the industry. When we were younger, there was probably 4 or 5 different choices of career that we had going back in those long distant days. But now with the internet, working from home, estate agency isn't as attractive to youngsters coming out of university and college than it was. And I think that's where I'd like to see in the next few years things change again, because otherwise there's going to be a real void, there's going to be a real problem. And that's not just with the companies that employ people, that's going to be for the self-employed models, because their supply will dry up as well. So I think that the industry itself needs to make it more attractive. Property market is really modernising now compared to 10 years ago. I think they've got a real responsibility, those guys, to share what an amazing industry it is and the careers that can be had in it. So I think that the industry, again, needs to help itself. We used to take it for granted that everyone loves property, everyone wants to be an estate agent, but that's what I think. I think some good recruitment companies out there. But when I speak to my friends that own recruitment companies, they'll all say the same thing: no candidates, lack of experienced candidates. So the salaries need to be looked at, the incentives need to be looked at, the way people are treated needs to be looked at. But I think, as a whole, the industry itself needs to tell people, share more about what an amazing industry, an amazing career you can have in it.
Good. And actually, I just want to come back on something that you said earlier, and you're spot on about, how exceptional this estate agency industry is. If you look recently, what happened with Agents Giving and their awards, and the amount of people there that are doing the most incredible job. I know they had their ball recently, which was absolutely phenomenal. And what goes on there is absolutely incredible. And then you look at Agents Together as well, and what Agents Together are doing. I mean, it's amazing what the industry
COVID,
does.
since COVID, I think it gave a lot of people a chance to reflect. But then also we've got a brand new generation coming through now, in their 20s and 30s and 40s. We can say that because we're so old, but a brand new generation that are making a difference and making the industry look different and feel different, and that had to happen. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a good time to be in the business. All of us got a choice to get out and do something else. I could have had a much easier life if I recruited in so many other industries when I had my recruitment company, but I chose to stick with what I know, and it's stuck with me now. But I think it's really good what's happening, and especially, like I said, I'm not just like, but the Property Mark guys, Megan, and some of the new faces that are coming through now are making a real difference. I was worried at one point, Stephen, very quickly that it was an old man's club, the Association of Estate Agents, and I joined it in 1982 as a kid. And it wasn't going to have any interest to the next generation coming through, and wasn't even going to survive. And then suddenly, bang! In the last 5 years, it suddenly looks really appealing. Youngsters should join it. They should, benefit from the meetings and the knowledge that they can get from it. And I'm really pleased to see that happening, because at one point that really was a concern.
And actually, just piggybacking on what you say, you've got the Women in the Estate Agency group, Women in Residential Property group that are doing some amazing things as well.
Yeah,
So,
amazing. Yeah.
One final question for you.
Yeah.
You know what's coming.
Okay.
If I could tell you one thing,
yeah.
what would it be?
Oh, it's easy. Don't take yourself too seriously. As I've got older, I've started to say to a lot of people, no one's that special, no one's that important. Don't take yourself too seriously. Be real, and people will buy real.
Brilliant, lovely. Ian, if people want to get hold of you, how do they do that, please?
Well, my mobile number, I've had the same mobile number since 1996. That's 07970 263 007. Or then contact me at ian@verifiedtrusted.com. Or
Brilliant.
obviously on LinkedIn. I've been there a while.
Fantastic. Look, thanks very much for your time. Thanks for
Enjoyed
being
it,
a great guest. Thanks for being my one and only viewer and listener, and always commenting every time. Really appreciate it. And for anybody else, thank you very much for watching and listening. Please like it, share it, tag your fellow colleagues in, and I look forward to seeing you on the next Lunchtime Learnings. Thanks very much.